right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story, let's start out with classic physique, specifically Terrence Ruffin. So Terrence has been a topic of conversation over the past couple of weeks as he's released more and more physique updates. But I want to talk about really the incredible difference between last week's update and this week's update. And he says the difference between these two updates was 6 pounds and that he intends to drop another 7 pounds for the Arnold Classic, which is coming up in just a week and a half. So the topic of conversation with the, I guess what you could call before picture, the picture that we got last week, was will he be ready in time for the Arnold? Because we saw those posing videos and pictures with him and Chris Bumstead. And Chris looked like he was significantly ahead of Terrence from a conditioning standpoint, even though Chris doesn't have to step on stage for 2 weeks later than Terrence does. So I think the difference between these two pictures is really rather remarkable, specifically looking at his legs. The separation in the detail in his quads in this shot, the improvements that he's made in just a week, maybe it was a little bit over a week that last picture was, maybe it was a week and a half, but dropping 6 pounds, he looks a lot better. He looks a lot sharper. And if those pictures really are just a week or so apart, or if he's trying to just throw us off with that first picture, but if they really are just a week or so apart, I think that's incredibly impressive, the fact that he could transform his body that quickly. I'm pretty impressed with that transformation, I'm not going to lie. If that's just a week or so, I mean, that's crazy how much more detail, how much more defined he looks in the second picture than the first. In the first one, to me, he looked a lot more watery. He had kind of a soft look to his physique, and he looks like he's tightened up quite a bit. So I'm kind of excited to see what kind of package he actually brings to the Arnold Classic stage. We know he's going to bring the posing. We know he's going to bring a top 2 in the world Olympia caliber physique. Conditioning for me is what I'm going to be looking at for Terrence. But I think this transformation post is a good sign so far. Now, next up in the news, also in Arnold Classic news, Steve Kuclo posting a physique update at just a week and a half out from the big show. This time in Redcon 1's gym, actually, down there in Florida. Steve looking insane. Steve looking grainy, looking hard, and looking ripped, which is exactly what we want to see from Steve. I believe he was around 290 pounds when him and Ian had that showdown at the Texas Pro. He's a mass monster. Steve is huge. I feel like Steve doesn't really get the credit that he deserves for the size that he does bring to the stage. And the fact that he brings conditioning. I mean, even though I would say he was a little bit off in Texas, especially at the night show, his conditioning there was still very good for a guy of his size. I mean, 290 pounds. He's probably in the 280s in this picture, but even at that weight, just look at how insane he looks to be that heavy. I mean, it's really something that I think a lot of people are discounting, and he might be a dark horse going into the Arnold, because really, while he does have a bigger name, I guess you could say, I don't really hear his name in the conversation as much for guys that could possibly win the Arnold Classic. And make no mistake about it, Steve has that potential. Steve has the potential to be top 3 at the Arnold. He has the potential to win that show. Whether he will or not remains to be seen, but I think writing off Steve Kuclo will be a dangerous mistake if you're a competitor in the Arnold Classic lineup this year. Now, next up in the news, Hunter Labrada just appeared at a guest posing this past weekend, the NPC Iron House Classic, at just weeks away from taking the stage on the Olympia stage. I believe right now we're exactly 4 weeks out from the Olympia. So this is Hunter doing a guest posing at 4 weeks out. And I got to say, he looks pretty damn good. And really a damn good poser, which I'm sure is something that he learned from his dad, Lee Labrada. And it's something that you don't really see as often in the younger generation of bodybuilders, that kind of emphasis on posing like Hunter has. Hunter's a pretty good poser. And it's cool to see that because, especially when you consider the contrast between his physique and his dad's physique, Hunter's significantly bigger than Lee was. But still, while carrying around that size, he still comes in and has the eloquent presentation of a physique that was like 200 pounds or less, one of those smaller classic physiques like his dad. So that's one of the things that I really like about Hunter's, even though kind of in comparison to his dad, he's kind of a mass monster. If I'm not mistaken, he competes at around 250 on stage, which is close to 50 pounds heavier than his dad. So the thing that I'm going to be looking at when we got these younger guys on the Olympia stage, Nick, Ian, Hunter, Justin Rodriguez, some of these newer guys, is which one of them or how many of them are going to be able to crack the top 6 this year, because that was something none of them have done so far. Sergio included in that if he's able to get to the Olympia, but that would require him to win the Arnold Classic. But that's really the race that I'm looking at here. Nick, Hunter, and Ian. Who's going to be the first one of them to crack the top 6? Because that's going to be what solidifies the younger generation guys as the top guys. That's going to be kind of the changing of the guards when those guys start placing in those higher placings at the Olympia. Hunter included in that. So I guess the question is, do you guys think that Hunter's going to be able to do that based on what you're seeing right here? Let me know in the comment section down below. Now, next up in the news, William Bonac offered us a little bit of a better, clearer, closer look at how he was looking at that guest posing. Now, Bonac, unlike Hunter, is only a week and a half away from stepping on stage. Hunter's still got 4. Bonac is pretty much, he's getting close to peak week now. And I think obviously that shows in this closer version of the video. You can see his lower back, that Christmas tree is starting to come in. You can see the conditioning all throughout his hamstrings. The hamstring glute tie-in, you can already see, I wouldn't call them really strided, but you can already see definition in his glutes, which I think is a good thing at 2 weeks out, because the majority of that last minute sharpening up comes from that last peak week, that final week, where he's going to start dropping that last little bit of water. So I would certainly say that it looks like Bonac is on track. This, to me, is what 2 weeks out, 1.5 weeks out should really look like, that kind of conditioning. And I really am kind of impressed by the fact that he's doing a guest posing that close to the show. But still, I'm going to stick with my prediction that even though Bonac on paper is the favorite, Bonac is the returning defending champion at the Arnold, I still think that this year there will be a new champion at the Arnold Classic this year. But who is going to win? That is the question that I want you guys to answer in the comment section down below. Now, the final story that I have for you guys today, GoodVito, Vitaly Ugonikov, the Russian bodybuilding sensation. He competed this past weekend, competing in, I'm not making this up, the Big Peter sports show. And no, this was not a competition to see whose Peter was the biggest. This was a bodybuilding contest. So I was actually looking at more pictures than just a picture that GoodVito posted, the victory post that he put up. I was looking at some of the comparison shots with him and some of the other guys in his class. And I think his conditioning was a little bit off here, and I think this goes to show that there's levels to this game. You see these off-season updates or even these contest prep updates of GoodVito and how freaky his physique looks under goon light with a good angle. He looks freaky almost every time. But on stage, I think it's a little bit of a different story. I think we saw a pretty soft version of GoodVito here, and I think that's kind of why when you make the comparison to the IFBB is a much higher level of competition. These bodybuilders are coming in much sharper than what you're seeing here. Even some of the top pros in the IFBB, when they come in off, I wouldn't say they were as off as he was here. So I guess the moral of the story here is simply just don't make assumptions that this guy is going to come in, if he ever came to the IFBB, and just dominate. Because while he does look freaky and while he's got a ton of potential and he's got a ton of time to really perfect bringing that package to stage, if he ever does want to compete with the IFBB or try to earn a pro card over here. But don't just assume he's going to come over and dominate, because if he came over with conditioning like that, it wouldn't really go that well for him. So that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. It helps out a lot. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet already. As always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.